Good morning. Welcome to office hours. Can you guys hear me okay? Just let me know if you can hear me. Hello. I'm your host, Marie Poulin, and today we are going to talk about building from scratch. I know if you guys have attended past office hours, or maybe you've seen my webinar or watched any of my YouTube videos, you've probably seen a lot of the more advanced use cases. And we often, we'll bring on guests and you guys will probably see these like really already kind of built out workspaces. And we get a lot of questions from people saying, that's nice and all, but how do I actually do that? So I'm hoping today with your help and with your questions that we can actually build some things from scratch as though you are starting absolutely fresh. I'm happy to use some of the examples in my workspace to show you the ways that I build it, if that's helpful for you. But I would like to kind of start without templates, just so that you guys get a feel for how the tool works. I think most of you can hear. Yeah, sounds good. Okay, cool. We do have a couple questions that popped in already. So yeah, just a quick bit of housekeeping. I will keep an eye on the chat as best I can, but if you do have a really specific question or a specific use case, make sure to use the ask a question area below, and I will do my best to stay on top of the questions. There's a few that came in that I can probably start to answer before diving in and building. Amir asked, what are some of the best automation processes that one can use to have a better Notion workflow? So I will say that Notion doesn't have an API yet. It is something that they are working on. So there are some limitations. I personally feel that the tool is still super powerful, way more powerful than when I was actually using things like Asana and Evernote with automations. So that being said, there are lots of shortcuts and things to get familiar with that will help speed up your workflow. I do use text expander and Alfred very often. So one of the things that I do really, really often is pulling in unique icons. And so I actually have some shortcuts there where I save all of those icons so I can quickly access them. And I'm happy to share that with you. So hopefully that helps. Hey, Ernesto. So good to see some familiar faces here. Somebody asked, is it possible to somehow integrate Notion with Todoist, either through third-party apps or otherwise? So I personally, I don't use Todoist, but there was a great response in there. Someone says that they can embed their Todoist on their dashboard page by choosing the embed module, and wrote todoist.com as the URL, then logged in, and then each time you look at your dashboard, Todoist is there. So that is one workaround. Yes, text expander is my best friend. I use it like hundreds of times a day. It'll definitely make your workflow really fast. Jonathan, Ben, great to see you guys in here. Hopefully we'll have Ben on in a future episode. Jonathan came on in our very first office hours and he showed us his workflow for helping people build curriculum, which is amazing. So there's just a ridiculous amount of stuff that you can do in Notion. Somebody asked, can you import calendar information into Notion from Outlook, Google Calendar as examples? Technically, yes, you can actually embed a Google Calendar as long as it is shared. But my gosh, it is hideous. And I just don't use it. I'm holding out for the API with regards to the Google integration. So I've just sort of found some workarounds within my own workspace. So hopefully that is helpful. I will, if there's any links that we reference throughout this session, I will definitely, as much as possible, try to post them in the sidebar, and we will also send out an email afterward that kind of rounds up all of the links and things that we reference. So hopefully that will help you out there. I did have somebody ask about the para method stuff, and I do think it'll be good to go into that a little bit too. And Jonathan, too, if you notice anybody asking any questions and there's something that you have quick access to and you're willing to post that in the chat, that would be awesome. Super appreciated. Okay, so I'm quickly going to go over the para method because I do think most of the way I think about and I build my workspaces and help my clients build their workspaces is based on an adapted version of the para method. And I do have this this article open up, which I will link to in the chat again. I know that we've definitely linked to this a few times. This is Tiago's article on the para method, and we did have some people asking who are a bit confused about how do you define the difference between an area and a resource. And so the way that I I think of it as areas are your areas of responsibility. They are things that don't really go away. They're things that you're always responsible for. This might be business, it might be product development, health is an area of your life. And I also think of areas as things that you personally are responsible for. Whereas resources are things that are a little bit more universal and general, and you might access your resources in various areas of your areas, if that makes sense. So areas I think of as personal areas of responsibility, things that are unique to you, your hobbies, your interests, parts of your business, and resources are kind of these global, almost like research and notes that you're going to pull in to be able to activate the projects that are active in your world. Projects have a set defined timeline. So projects tend to be made up of more than a couple tasks. And so we'll go into a little bit more detail about that. I do use Notion as my task manager as well. Some people use an external task management, and that's fine. I just find it so valuable to be able to link my tasks to my goals, to areas, to resources, to be able to perform that task and have that all live in one space. I find that makes me a lot more productive. So that's my personal opinion on Para. Looks like some people want to see the weekly, daily, monthly, quarterly planner all interlinked, so we can definitely create some interconnected databases, which will be awesome. I think that's really Notion's power, is connecting up the databases. And we have a couple more specific questions about databases. Awesome. So we can get into that. I know a lot of people use Todoist as their managers. Notion's more of a checklist manager. That's awesome. There's so many options for how you can use it. So I'd love to hear from you quickly in the sidebar. If there's a really specific use case you'd like me to start with, I would love to create a task management area. I'd love to set up the projects, areas, resources, kind of the way that I would set it up for myself. But if there's something really specific that you want to see in that process, definitely let me know, and I will keep an eye on that. Somebody asked, what is Praxis? Tiago Forte, who's actually coming on next week, I'm really excited about. He has this community called Praxis. He talks about building a second brain and productivity and how you think about and store your digital information. So that's just a reference to the article that he wrote about the Para method of organization. Again, I will say that I think Para is somewhat limited in that it was sort of based on the way Evernote works, but the fact that Notion can do task management and calendar and all sorts of other things, I actually use a much more adapted version of Para, and I can go into that. Oh, the timeline view. A lot of people have asked about that. There is a timeline view coming up, has not been released yet. I cannot wait for that. That's like a Gantt chart, so you can sort of see multiple tasks on a timeline view, which will be super handy. Really excited about that. So some of you may not know this. I've had a number of people say that they weren't aware that if you click on the question mark in the bottom right-hand side, you can see all the keyboard shortcuts, you can get the support guide. They really do have a lot of great documentation. I do encourage you to check it out. Again, you'll see there's quite a few links here. I know it can be pretty overwhelming when you're just getting started. At the very least, I would say learning the keyboard shortcuts will really, really help you speed up your workflow. You don't need to know all of them, of course, but there are some pretty standard ones, especially when it comes to the formatting. I use the probably Command Option 9 all the time to type out text and quickly turn it into a page. So I'll show you that. That's just something to get to know. Definitely get familiar with that because you've got some really quick formatting shortcuts. And as you're moving data very quickly in Notion, you're going to want to be familiar with those. How do you use a master task database to surface common tasks for various longer term different projects? Okay, great question. And I would love to see a health journal so I could track symptoms and view them on a calendar. Awesome. Yes, Notion is definitely overwhelming when you first start. So I hear that time and time again, people open it up, and I think Notion's greatest strength is also their greatest weakness is it's a blank canvas and you can do almost anything. And if you aren't necessarily a systems thinker or you haven't, you're not a designer, you don't necessarily have some of those structures set up for yourself, then it's going to be pretty overwhelming. And I think that's another reason why the PARA method, projects, areas, resources, archives, can give you a lot of structure to start. And I think you can definitely build out and adapt, but you got to start somewhere. How do you use daily templates, especially to create a daily journal? So I personally create I create my own templates. Again, the templates that they provide are great. There's some really great starting points. So you can click here, go to templates, and you can see there's lots of different categories here: design templates, support templates, the process docs. There's some really great stuff already ready to go. So we can definitely pull in a couple of these if they're helpful, and then I can show you how to actually adapt it for your own needs. Because sometimes, pulling this in, you might pull it in and parts of it are useful and parts of it are like, the tags don't really make sense for my kind of business or whatever. And so I can show you how to manipulate the data and move stuff around. So you can always pull any of these in at any point if they're helpful for you. There's like editorial calendars, content calendars, things like that. And then you can click here and view the full template gallery. So again, there's actually quite a few in here, organized by category. And again, it can be a little overwhelming. I know sometimes people will put them in their account and then they're like, well, now what do I do? And the data is not really connected and you don't necessarily have a system yet for how are you actually tracking your information, or how do you actually set up your projects. So I'm going to start from scratch with a couple use cases, and then I will check in on the chat and just make sure that I'm keeping on top of what people are asking for. Global tags, that's actually a great question, and I am happy to jump into my workspace to give you an example. There we go. I think I've got one open here. Okay, so this is just a super quick overview of what my space looks like. So I have a dashboard, an inbox, journal, tasks, calendar, projects, areas, resources, archives. So you can see this is obviously a slightly adapted version of the Para because I will reference these tasks inside of my other projects. You can see projects here is a database, calendar is a database, master tasks is a database. This is actually obviously got a ton of tasks in it, and the master task database itself is not super useful on its own. So I would never just come in here and look into my tasks. But what I will do is I will pull that task database into a weekly planner. And so I can actually see my to-dos here in a filtered view. So that's where you really start to see the power of the master task database, is once you're pulling those databases into other more useful dashboards. So I will go into that in a little bit more detail. Just checking the sidebar here. Okay, I'm just going to check the questions here that are coming in. Okay, we covered some of the automation stuff, and I'll go into the shortcuts. Okay, how do you quickly capture an idea, note, or anything of that sort into Notion? That's a great question I'll get into once we've got the space created. So the most important thing for you to know when you're starting to create your Notion space, that actually it took me a little while to pick up on, and it also is something that all of my clients end up asking me. You go to create a page, and let's start with a projects database. I prefer to do this as a database. So your options are basically a page or a database. If you choose a database, you can only have one database. If you choose page, you can have multiple databases on that page. So that distinction is super important to know. I personally like doing a gallery for my projects. I like to be able to add a cover image and properties, maybe like status. And let's make that a multi-select. Let's make that a select. So we can say active, in progress. Actually, in progress is kind of the same. So let's say hold, maybe canceled, and completed and archived. Great. So now we've got some basic statuses to choose from. We'll probably want a date field. So let's say this fancy project is something that we're going to do. We're going to start it today, and we're going to include an end time. And let's say that's like a couple weeks project. And I want to set a reminder for myself 1 week before. I can include a time if I want, don't really need to do that. So you can see that this is going to span here. Now, what I will often do is I will embed a master task database below. I haven't created that yet, so I won't do that just yet. You can add as many properties as you want here. Maybe I will add a person property to assign that to me. Great. And then I like to turn on these properties here. So you can choose page cover, page content. I can choose if I want these larger. And I like to include some of these status items here. And I like to always include an outcome. So what will make this project a success? Do that thing. And the nice thing too is with the text field, you can actually format that. So sometimes I like to give that a yellow background, make it stand out. And then at a glance, I can sort of see these different project properties. So hopefully this is making sense. I'll keep an eye on the chat. Great. I can even duplicate that too, if that is easier than starting the not so fancy project. Great. Okay. So I've got a super basic 2 projects here, and let's also make a task database. I'm a huge fan of the master task database, as you probably know. Set this up as a simple table. And I can start adding a bunch of things to do, more things. Great, okay. And this is where I can add checkbox to say done. I can drag that to, and you can drag the columns around, no problem. I like to add a date for the tasks, due date, or I know at egghead.io, they don't do dates, due dates, they do check-in dates. So that's another way that you can use that. So let's say that's today. That one's Monday. Great. I can tag these as personal. I can tag these as product dev. You can choose whatever you want for your categories. Sometimes there might be a URL associated with something, and I like to just kind of make that an quick, easy access. If I open this up, you'll see all those properties are here. So this is another easy way to add new properties as well. So let's do a relation to our project database that we created. So if I create that relation, and I click in here, you can see there's the fancy project and the not so fancy project that I created. So that's where you start to see how connecting up these databases starts to get really powerful. So if I connect that up, I can see that's the project that it's connected to. If I jump into fancy project, you can actually see that now that task is already pre-populated. So they kind of get mirrored. Let's see here. Right. Okay, I know some people are keeping on top of it in the chat. Thank you. And so I like to rename this too, and I just say tasks. Great. And so those are connected up. And what I can do also on the projects page is I can show the tasks. So you can see that at a glance, if I just want to get a really high-level overview of what's happening with my projects, I can see any of the tasks that are associated with it right here. Great. Let's set up an areas. There's so many different ways you can do this, but I actually like to have the areas be a page, which allows me to do things like, type a call out. This is in progress. And then what I like to do is create an inline database. So the whole page isn't a database, but I can create as many databases as I like within this. I can import one, I can create an inline one. So let's do a table inline. And this can be a link to all the different areas. So let's say I've got health. Let's say I've got Girl Guides, product development. Right. And it'll seem really kind of boring and simple at first, but the more that you get a feel for it and you start adding emojis and you start adding your tags and things like that, it really starts to come together. So you'll notice that there's add a view. So you can view a database in these 5 different forms. You can do it as a simple table, a Kanban board, a calendar, a list, or a gallery. And depending on your use case, there are some cases where, like in a weekly view, I like viewing a Kanban board as a weekly view, and I can sort of look at things by status. I can look at things by day of the week. There's a few different ways that we can do that. So often with areas, I like to do those as a gallery, and we'll set up a couple different views just to show you what those look like. Let me know if there's any questions. That Health Girl Guide. So again, these are areas of my life. These are areas that I'm responsible for. Some of these will be business related. Some of these will be personal. Health, for example, that's an area of my life. And there might be health routines, workout schedules, links to interesting classes that I want to take, a yoga class, things like that. Anything related to health can live under here. And I might have projects in this area that are actually health related. So maybe I have a goal of being like, get super buff, or like, I'm not interested in losing weight, but maybe like build a workout routine, something like that. And maybe that's something that I want to spend the next 2 weeks. I'm going to give myself 2 weeks to like establish a consistent routine. I think they say 3 weeks for a habit, right? So let's do that. Build a workout routine. And as part of that, there's going to be tasks involved in that where it's like research effective routines. And that's going to get added to the master task database automatically. So let's go back to my areas. Okay, so there's nothing much in these. So what I like to do with these properties of the gallery is I will sometimes hide the cover image. And so I've just got these fun little areas here, and you can add icons. Let's see, workout, or like muscle. There we go. There's my health emoji there. Okay. And so what I often like to do is, again, use the relational databases. So I'm going to tie this to a project. I'm going to say, let's tie that. Projects, great. And I know that that's my build a workout routine. That's a project that those are tied together. And let's make sure to rename that project. Great. So you can see how like within certain areas of your life, like there might be multiple projects as part of health. Like one of them might be, build meal prep program or template in Notion, which I've already done, but whatever, we'll just put that in there. Just to give you an example. And then if I go back to projects, you will see that build meal prep template in Notion got automatically added here. And so you can start to see how these areas are connected. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of how those databases are connected. And so we've got our master tasks database at the moment, which is not going to be super exciting yet until we start to pull it into other areas. We've got our projects here. And I mean, archives is not super exciting, but let's make that. And then I like to, you can drag and drop, you can reorganize these. I can make new pages within these. You can definitely move data around very easily and quickly. I'll just check in with the questions that are coming in. Does that make sense so far? Okay, so I know that some people have asked, how do you set up your planner? So I'm going to add to this para method, and I'm going to say, let's do a journal, because I think a journaling habit, whether it's daily, weekly, whether it's business or personal, I think is really powerful. And I do this as a, I actually have multiple different views of my journal, but let's start by setting one up. So let's start today with our new journaling habit. I'm going to set up a date property. Great. And so some people will actually use the date in here that will actually update dynamically. I don't like to do that because I like to call items by typing them in with the relational databases. So I like to just name it exactly what it is. And let's say I often have a bunch of multi-selects in there. So like I like to track my feelings, happy, anxious, sad, confused, whatever. You can always add those and delete those later. Also like to rate my effectiveness. So if you do any kind of like 12-week year type things where you're sort of evaluating your productivity or things like that, I like doing that personally. And so I might say like, sometimes it's fun to put an emoji in there. Let's see here. Super effective. And I actually I'll put like stars in there. Not effective. Somewhat effective. And so all the things that you want to track is what goes in here, right? So maybe you like to track, did you do that, workout, daily workout? Did you take your vitamins? That can be a checkbox. And again, you can always put little emojis in here too and make it more playful and fun. I don't really use files in my journal. If that's useful for you, you can keep them. Sometimes I like to add tags for whether I ran errands or haircut, things like that. And what are some other properties? Oh, and I will often track my tasks and project focus. So again, I will pull that in from our master database. Tasks, great. And then I can pull, so I can say research effective routines. That's the task that I'm going to do today. So you can start to see how that gets pretty powerful. And I like to connect the projects as well. And then that way, each day I kind of know what my focus is for that day. Projects. Cool. I like to add a little icon. Great. And so because I'm going to be doing a lot of these different entries, what I like to do is create a template. So we definitely want to create a journal template. And so I always like to pull in an image for the day. And so again, this is just our template, so I'm not actually going to put that in. Gratitude, maybe there's like recap of the day. What happened today? That was awesome. Sometimes people like to put their morning routine here. And then you might have like drink water, 5-minute meditation, whatever you want can go in there. And you can probably see I'm using a lot of keyboard shortcuts with the formatting. So Command Option 2, 3, 1 to change up the sizing. Awesome. And so that's a really, really simple one. Mine is a little bit more complex. But that way, if I want to add a new journal template, let's say I add one for yesterday, I can say, woohoo, happy yesterday. I took my vitamins and I did that thing. And then I add my image. I often just drag my images right in. It's super easy. Hopefully that's loading in. You guys probably can't see what I'm doing on my screen here, but just drag a picture of Mochi in there. There we go. And then, oh, and also simple thing on the template, I can adjust the icon here so that it will always have the same icon. So if I open up on the 10th, I think I made this before I added the icon. Okay, great. And so what I like to do is create a couple different views. So visual visual diary. And I like the gallery view of that. And then there you can see there's beautiful mochi. And sometimes I like to, show my feelings, show my tasks. Did I do the vitamins, workout, that sort of thing? And then if you, like to track your habits and routines on a daily basis, then I will often do like a progress tracker of sorts. And that will be more of a table view. And then you might, don't need to show the date twice. So I would probably drag this up. And then that way you can like start to see your effectiveness over time. And maybe I'll just jump in very quickly to my journal to show you what that looks like. So I've got my visual diary here. I can show my effectiveness, my feelings, and then I've also got like progress. So, oh no, October 7th, I didn't put my words in. I'll have to retroactively do that. But you can see over time, as I'm tracking my priority, I'm even tracking my reading, then I can start to do a reading list. And so if I click on reading, you can see over time, and this is filtered by anything that has reading of not empty will do this. And so if I open up this, maybe to show you what this looks like, you can see I'm linking to a reading database, I'm linking to my tasks database, week database, etc. So that's just to kind of give you a sense of how you can start tying that information together. I'm just going to check to see if there's any questions that have come in as part of that. Is that pretty helpful to see how that database Cool. Okay, so that's an example of the journal is now connected to the projects. It's now connected to the tasks. Let's also create maybe a fun dashboard. So for example, you may not want to just click it like, the projects view on its own is not necessarily helpful. The journal view on its own is not necessarily helpful. So what I do is I've got this weekly database. So let me click on that to show you what that looks like. So I create a dashboard and then I've got this weekly database, if you will, and that way I can track all the most important things. I can track my outcomes, my project focus, and you can see that it's connected to a lot of different pieces. So I track my, quarterly outcomes, tasks, reading, all of that good stuff. So let's also make sure we create a resources archive, because we had a few questions about how do you actually quickly save things into Notion. So again, I like to choose, there's so many ways you can do this, but I like to choose a page as my resources because I do find I have a couple different databases. So I just hit enter and I would say reading. I have a reading and listening database and I hit Command Option 9 to turn that into a page. And then maybe you have a swipe file. I like to save examples of cool things I see on the internet and beautiful sales pages and things like that. So I save that into a swipe file. And so I jump into the reading and listening, and let's create, if you watch the, Building a Second Brain, you'll know that the reading and listening or the notes database is really one of the more powerful uses for Notion. So we've got name, tags, files. Yeah, okay. I like to add a URL. Great. And this will be super basic to start, but what we'll do is let's say I want to save this awesome article about the para method. I'm gonna have to see how this works because I have a couple different workspaces. So you've got the Notion Clipper. Make sure to download that. I use that on my phone all the time, even if I'm on Instagram and there's a really beautiful image or a note or something that I want to save, I will save that right from my phone to Notion, and that's pretty straightforward. Okay, so let's use the Clipper, and you can see it saves the title. And I don't want to save that to my client's workspace. I want to save that to my workspace. And I don't want to save that to journal. I want to save that to my reading. Sometimes you may have to type the database if it doesn't pull up automatically. Once you've saved to the database in the browser, it tends to remember and it becomes a lot easier to do that. So save the page, open that in Notion. So you can see it saved the URL automatically, saved the title, and then you can see it's actually populating. There you go. So it pulls in all those images and all those things. And so what I like to do is also add a summary. Old past Marie would have just been hoarding digital resources and saving them for just in case one day I might need these, which is not super helpful. And so these days I actually try to summarize it and say, para projects, areas, whatever. And I would actually create a little summary in there for myself, which makes it a lot easier to remember your stuff. Great. So there's my summary of this awesome article. So that's really high level, how to save things into your database. So you can see the icon changes up when you're actually using that database. So is that helpful? Digital resource hoarder. Yeah, I think a lot of us tend to do a lot of that resource hoarding. Okay, Rod said, we can't see how the clipper worked when you were selecting. Oh, okay. So when you click on the Evernote or on the Evernote, on the Notion clipper, it just automatically pulls the name into the field, and you just have to choose. You have to choose where you want to send it, and you have to make sure that you're sending it to the right place, obviously. So when you're clipping something, I would not send that into resources, because that would just put it as a file right here, which I don't want. I actually wanted that to go right into the database. So I just had to make sure that I was selecting the reading and learning database so that it would go right there. So you can see there's some empty fields there that we don't need. Now, I often also will create some templates for this. Let me just jump into my space as well so I can show you. So for example, I have this notes database, master notes, and there's a lot of properties in here. And I think I have a couple of different templates here. So What Works is a community that I'm active in. And so sometimes I like to save, if there's a really great post in there, I will save that in there, and that kind of automatically saves that with that selected with the icon that goes with that. And so anytime you're saving something from somewhere kind of over and over again, sometimes I find it more helpful to actually save in this fashion. So I might click new YouTube, and you can see the icon is already ready to go. Source is YouTube, and it's a little bit of a shortcut, but it just kind of makes it easier to save things in a format that you might use over and over again. So hopefully that's helpful. Okay, I'm going to check in on the questions. So we covered how to quickly capture ideas. Notion Todoist we covered. Okay, I will go into a little bit more detail about how I do this weekly planning situation, because honestly, the weekly planner is pretty much where I spend almost all of my time. I find that to be the most useful. So we'll go into that. Yes, this is being recorded. You can always check out any of the past office hours anytime. Okay. Someone had a para question. Okay. Using para, when should something be a project versus an area? I would say areas do not have a defined timeline. Projects always have a fixed start and end date. There's an intention for them to be finished at some point, whereas areas are kind of things that you're almost always responsible for. Like, I volunteer for Girl Guides. That's an area of my life. There's probably lots of projects and things to do and tasks within that area, but that's not like a thing that has an end date. So that's kind of an easier way, I think, to think about it, is just area is like a personal area of responsibility. Projects are defined in scope. They have tasks associated with them. There's kind of like a nice, clean deadline. There will be an end to them. There is an outcome at some point, and hopefully that makes sense. If I want to have a daily done's list, but have certain entries feed into a larger table, yes. Okay. Is there an easy way to do that? A daily done's list. Okay. Yeah. So really the task management is kind of where a lot of the magic happens. Okay. Let me close this, close some of mine. Okay. So yeah, let's make a custom dashboard, because on its own, these aren't necessarily super exciting to look at or super useful, but let's say we make a dashboard and you want to see what your daily tasks are. So what I like to do is embed. If I start by hitting slash and type in CR, it starts to pull up your options, create linked database. I want to pull in our tasks. Great. So you can see there's that task database. You'll see this scrolling bar here. Anytime I am embedding databases in a page, I like to go to the top and say full width. And that kind of opens things up a little bit, and it's a lot easier to work with the data. So I tend to like things in a certain order here. Done checkbox on the left. Files, I don't often use files. I don't necessarily need to see the journal relations right there. Even tags are not necessarily always helpful. But one thing I do like to do, daily to do thing. I'm just going to mimic this daily done thing that you were asking about. So one thing you may want to consider doing is having a day. And so Monday, Tuesday, setting up one of these for every day of the week. You can also add emojis to those if you are so inclined. And sometimes I'll actually add a someday to this. Okay, so let's say I'm going to add a view here. Kanban view can sometimes be helpful. So I have tasks by day. And what I can do is say, I know that I want to do that on Tuesday. This is definitely going to happen on Wednesday, Monday. Okay. And so you'll notice that if I drag this into Monday and I open this up, that now has the property of Monday automatically. So it automatically will update that grouping. And I can also hide this if I want. And I can choose how much space these take up. So maybe I just want the card size to be small, and maybe I don't want to show the done. That isn't really helpful. In fact, what I like to do is add a filter here. So I only want to see things that are not done. So done is either not checked. And that way, if I do one of these things and mark it as done, that disappears. And I can start to see what's coming up this week, if that's helpful. Okay, so a daily dones list. I know somebody mentioned also if they could actually see the same list in a list view and a Kanban board view. So one thing you can do here, you can actually copy the link to that database, paste it, and create linked database again. So then that's copied and ready to go. And in this case, so let's leave this one as a list view. And we can filter this one differently. So let's say I only want to see the personal things in this list, or let's say we don't want to, you could actually say done is checked and date is today, or something like that. If you just wanted to be like my punch list of things that I did today. Or you could say, you know, day is Monday. And this could just be like Monday list. And so these are the exact same databases, but they're just filtered views, right? So you can see the same thing in a couple different ways, and even hide different categories. So like, let's say I want to hide that, hide this, and you could also hide that by opening up the properties here and just hiding all of it. There you go. There's just a super simple list. So there's a number of ways you can actually work with the same database in the same place. And then on the dashboard too, I like to pull up my projects. So I like to see like what's active, you know, just kind of at a glance. There we go. And I like to do the projects as a gallery. You can also do that as a list view. That might be helpful. And so that kind of, you know, shrinks and simplifies things. And then you could sort that. I like to sort it so that the active stuff, the status. So those are sorted by status. Hopefully that's helpful. Awesome, fancy. I'll be watching this one over and over. Okay, cool. I know sometimes too, it can be kind of going quickly and doing a lot of shortcuts. So if there's anything that comes up, you're like, wait a second, what's happening there? But you can see that you can embed as many databases as you want, and you can make the views work the way that you want. So if this isn't helpful to you, like maybe this is my work week dashboard and I actually don't want to see the stuff that's on Saturday and Sunday. Let's hide that. And I can also hide the someday. And then I could actually have a someday area at the bottom too that maybe just shows me someday projects, just shows me someday tasks. You can really embed whatever you want. I could even embed the reading list, just show me all my reading and learning from the last week, show me a top level view of my journal. And I like that gallery view because I like to see pretty pictures of my dog. There you go. And so then you can sort of see your, visual diary, if you will. And I make those small. And again, you can choose to show information or not. You can, I think you can even hide the name. So you can just, show a picture that represents the day or the week, which I think is kind of fun to make your space a little bit more visual. Someone said, no, they tried following up in Notion parallel on a screen. Yeah, I mean, you can always go back and look at this video and see what we did. Stuck with the read-only view. Yeah, like the calendar integration is not great. And so I have my own way of dealing with, time-sensitive items. People did ask about recurring tasks as well. I mean, anything that's time-sensitive, meetings, things like that, I rely on my calendar for that. Of course, I have dates and things associated with my tasks here, but yeah, the Google Calendar integration is not quite there yet. Okay, I'm going to say, so these are my tasks. Okay, so again, this dashboard can look however you want. It can have, cover images, and they've got this Unsplash diary too, so you're more than welcome to switch that up and have some fun with it. And so the other thing I like to do on my dashboard is create quarterly goals. So a weekly planner. Oh, I need to create a inline database weekly. And what I like to do is we make sure that there's a date property in here. Either week. And so let's say that's from the 14th to the 20th. Great. And this is where, I like to add those effectiveness, the words, all of that good stuff. Anything that you need to track on a weekly basis. Again, habits. Did you do that thing that week? Did I post that YouTube video? Did I do an office hours? Any of that you can track in whatever way is going to make the most sense for you. You'll see everyone's workspace looks so different because our brains are so different. But yeah, let's be like vitamins, whatever, or like workout, meditation, any of that stuff you can track in there. And then of course, I like to connect the databases. So I like to know what was my focus for the week of October 14th to 20th. So let's look up my projects. Awesome. And let's say my fancy project and my meal prep template, that's my project focus this week. And what I like to do, of course, is create a template. And some of you might have seen my weekly template before it was part of my before it was part of a database. So I'm going to show you how I recreate my weekly agenda. So at the top, I like to have, let's make sure that this is correct. Tasks. I'm going to relate that to my tasks database again. Great. And I like to have a date that is separate from my tasks. So I'm going to just very quickly show you how I do this. And so to move things around, you click and drag, and you just have to drag it to the right-hand side to create columns. You will not believe how long it took me to figure that out. embarrassing amount of time. And there. So then you've got your columns, and I also like to format these, make them bigger, whatever. And I usually will create templates for this. So you'll notice there's a template button here. And so add a new work event. And I like to color code things so that work events have a pink background, and then that way it matches up with my Google Calendar. And then I'll say like 9 a.m. with. Okay, and when I close that, so this becomes a template. Let's say I need to add a new work event. I drag that in. And I can say, Wednesday, I've got that other meeting. And of course I go in. So I'll do this every Friday afternoon or Sunday evening. And I'll just say like, go through, edit those up. And then similarly, I'll make a template button for personal. And now obviously this is the template, so I shouldn't actually add those yet, but that's just to give you a sense of those little automations where when you're doing something over and over again. I also do this for projects. So if there's certain project types that you do over and over again, and then you want to nest specific tasks underneath that, people who run podcasts and they have like multiple tasks, things that you always know that you're going to need to do every time, I always make a project template for that. So I like to have this sort of at a glance weekly view. And then sometimes I'll have like quick notes, take out garbage, things like that. And these are kind of I kind of keep these separate from my tasks, which tend to be a little bit more business related. And again, I sometimes might do this as a Kanban view. And then you can see it's already grouped by day. So the Kanban view it needs a property like a drop-down selector or a selector to be able to do that, that auto sorting. And let's shrink it so that it's small. I'm on my laptop, so on my big screen I kind of have it so that they're medium and they're sort of matched up here. But I like to hide. I like to hide the weekend because I like to, I again kind of use this as my business thing. I hide this someday. I just want this to be super focused. Let's make that medium maybe, so that they sort of closely aligned. And then these are like my project tasks, and these might just be quick notes or send that email. I could do these as tasks here, and I can actually drag these over here as well. But I kind of like to separate out my meetings up here. And so meetings and obligations tend to go up here. And then I've got my, meaty tasks that I need to do are below. Hopefully that makes sense. So how do you get to, you can get to almost any function by hitting the / command, and you'll see you've got all these different options here. If you start typing anything, like if I start hitting TEM, you can see template button appears. So once you get kind of comfortable and familiar with that, anytime you hit the /, you're going to start to notice you've got all these different options. And just by quickly typing, you can get those options. Yes, blog publishing calendar. It's great for podcast planning, for editorial calendars, you name it. There's so many options there. Wow, we have a lot of questions coming in that I haven't gotten to. Let's take a look. Okay, I haven't fully finished this daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly thing yet. Okay, so let me quickly wrap this up. Okay, so one thing that I do like to do is I link this to my quarterly goals. Those aren't ready yet, so that database isn't quite ready yet, but let me show you by going back to the dashboard. Okay, so as you'll see here, I'm going to hide some of these properties. But if I want to make a new week, I've got that template, which I didn't name, and that opens up here, and you can see that all that's kind of ready to go. I open that as a page. And I'll have to make sure, one thing you have to make sure is that whatever view you want to be your default has to be at the top. And then that will show up in the Kanban view. So there we go. I have another week ready to go. let's make that for the, there we go. And so similarly to how I have this weekly view, I will actually make a quarterly view. Let's make that a database. I like to make that a gallery. Quarterly. And let's say this is Q1. Right. And so what I want to do is link that up to, I want that to be a relation, and I'm going to link that to the weekly database. So you notice I can pull the weekly database even though it's an inline database. And so let's say I'm going to pull in weeks. And this just allows me to very quickly, when I'm in this week, you can see it's related to Q1. And these days, I don't do this kind of same linking. I like to link to the actual objective itself so that every time I'm in my weekly view, let me go back to my Notion space. So when I'm in my weekly view, I can, again, see what are the outcomes for that. So if I jump to that, you can actually see this is my part of my big initiatives. And so again, there's a lot of interrelated databases and things like that. So in the past, I used to link to Q4, but that doesn't really tell me a lot. So now I can very quickly at a glance see what my focus is for the week, right? I can see all those outcomes that are the most important thing for that week, what my project focus is, and that really helps me keep focused. And I know what my bigger goals are, not just getting caught in the weeds of the day-to-day. So that's kind of what we're doing with this linking up the journal. You know, there'll be 7 entries every week, so I can see all of the journal entries and I can jump to them very quickly. I can jump to the month. So I do that, you know, weekly, monthly, quarterly journaling, and all of those are kind of interconnected. And then similarly, the resources and reading and listening is connected to a lot of those different databases as well. So if I open that up, I can see those are the days that I was reading that book. I can see related notes. I can see which week that was my focus, and it's all connected. And I can, again, jump right back into that week and I can see what was going on that week. And I find that really helpful. Things aren't as buried. It does take some time to kind of get your dashboard assembled and things organized, but I hope that helps give you a sense of kind of how to work with databases, how to work with pages, how to interconnect that data a little bit better. Okay, Omar, I will say it took me a while. It definitely took me a number of times reading Para for it to really sink in. And I tried it, I resisted it. I was like, I don't know if this makes sense. It did take me a while. And once it clicked, everything started to make a lot more sense. And again, I think you got to take what works and leave the rest. So to me, it didn't make sense to put everything only in projects, areas, resources, archive, because a journal, like, sure, I could put that in areas. I could put that as, it's not a project. It could be a resource. To me, that didn't really make sense with the way that my brain works. So I just adapted it, and I've got my own calendar. I've got my own journal and tasks. And again, because Notion can manage tasks, it's really powerful. I'm just going to use that as a top level item, and that makes sense in my brain. So don't hesitate to take what works and adapt it for your own projects and needs. There's so much more we can do with this. I know that in some ways we're only just scratching the surface. I'm going to take a look at, yes, Ben made a really great point. I think Notion is actually way better for implementing Para than Evernote. And I actually think the Para structure is a little bit limited because Evernote doesn't manage tasks. And I think in some ways you're trying to force information into a structure, but with Notion, there's almost no limitations in the way that you're able to connect this data. So it actually opens up a lot more options, and you can be referencing a single resource in a task, in a project, in a database. Like, you can reference one piece of information in so many different places without it having to live in a notebook where you're like, is this under this category or this category? And it's like your brain has to work too hard to categorize things. So in Notion, you don't even necessarily need to categorize a resource, but you can pull that resource as needed when you need it. And that's the magic of it. Are there any other questions? Feel free to type them in the sidebar. I know there's a lot in the question and answer area that I didn't get to. So if there's any kind of quick questions, or if anybody even wants to come up and workshop something in their space, I'd be happy to chat about that. Yes, Kevin, I do have a few YouTube videos on that. I have one specifically on relational databases. I have a couple different ones. Let's see, master task database, relational databases. I will post that in the sidebar. Yes, relational databases kind of blew my mind when I first discovered them. And I feel like they are kind of the key to that top level. Like I've said this before, but I really think the biggest benefit for me of Notion is being able to surface the information that you need when you need it. So in a weekly view, I can see what my big goals are. You know, when I'm in a project, I know what pieces of that project need to get done. Things aren't living in different places. It does take time to build the system in the way that your workflow and your brain works. But once you've built it, it's really easy to maintain. So hopefully that helps. Ben has an amazing setup too. So I'm hoping that Ben, at some point in the future, you'll be willing to come on and we can talk a little bit more about even like your review cycles and things like that. I do consulting on this too, and I help teams also integrate this into their workspaces. So that is something that I'm happy to chat about if that's of interest. Can people share their custom templates with another person? Yes, they can. I have tons of templates too. If you go to notion.mariepoulin.com, I'll put that in the sidebar. Yes, if you want some more templates, I'm always working on these. So if that's helpful for you, please check those out. And so, yeah, you can always share your templates with other people. Sometimes it can be, I find it a little tricky to share the ones that have interconnected databases because it means I have to I have to duplicate and clear out personal data and things like that, but still make sure all the connections are maintained. So, but absolutely, you can share if you like something that your friend has done and they're willing to share it with you. There's a little option in the top right. Share. And so I can say public access is enabled, and I can, in fact, why don't I I'll copy this page link. Now, if these other databases aren't shared, I think you'll only just see a blank database. So I'll share that in there just for fun, if that's useful. Someone asked a really great question about a tags database. I will say that I think this goes into a little bit more of an advanced use case, but I will elaborate on something that I do now have a master tags database that I'm experimenting with this a little bit. I want to see if this is the best way to do it. So you'll notice I've got these tags here. So instead of, let's say, I'll go to one of my resources here and open up one of these. Okay, so you'll see I've actually got tags here, positioning, and then I've got tags here. And so what I'm experimenting with is a master task database the best way to handle this? And then that way I can actually see all of the interconnections for a single entry. So if I'm looking at copywriting, then I can see all of the notes that are related to copywriting. And if you just did that as a drop-down tag, you wouldn't have that functionality. And this allows me to save any swipe, reading, calendar entries, anything that's related to copywriting. I can see that all in one go. So that is something that I'm experimenting with. I want to see if that's, you can see there's only a couple entries in some of these. So I'm still experimenting with that. I think I'm going to like that. Some of my pages, you'll notice, like, do have a lot of entries, but I find the benefit is that I can just quickly jump into any of those super quickly. And I can see, mindfulness, technology. Some things have more notes than other things, but I try to always give it a summary and at the very least give it a tag here. So hopefully that helps. Is there a website for icon? I mean, you can do any icons with Notion. You can upload any URL, any JPEG. The Noun project is a good one. Yep. So there's definitely lots of options. Sue asked, was areas just a page you set up? Missed this? Yes, absolutely. Areas is just a page. I just clicked new workspace, called it areas. There you go. And again, I can say, maybe I want to drag this into here. If I click on areas, you'll see there's that page. So again, you can have pages within pages, databases within pages. You can do all sorts of stuff. Okay, is it possible to have multiple tasks from master database linked to a single page? Yeah, I think that was already answered. How do you move items from swipe file into resources categories? Okay, great question. One of my favorite things about Notion is the ability to move data around to different databases. So at any point, I can open up this thing and I can say, actually, this isn't a task. This is more like a resource. I can hit Command-Shift-P or click here, move to. So I use Command-Shift-P all the time. If I want to move something to a page, if I want to move a page to a database, you can literally move any piece of data into any other area by hitting Command-Shift-P. So let's say move this thing. So I'm in the tasks database, but I really want this to be moved into the resources area. I hit Command-Shift-P, and I will move that to my reading and listening. And you can see the properties change, right? Because those are the properties that we have in that database. And so if I open this as page, I can see that that is now in there. So very, very easy. And like, let's say I change my mind. I'm like, I want to move that back to the tasks database. I can do that too. And you will see that those properties have been restored. So that is definitely an awesome feature that I use all the time. Yeah, so more people are asking about the para method adaptation. I did do an office hours on that. You can definitely watch older episodes. We talked a little bit about that with the building a second brain. I can go into more detail in a future YouTube video if that is helpful. But I think we did cover a good chunk of the para stuff today, so I don't want to go too far into that. Definitely read that article, and we will definitely send out any of the links, resources, and things that we sent people or that we mentioned during this episode. Happy to stay a little later if it's helpful for people. I know there's still 83 people on, which is awesome. Can you show all your workspace trees, how you select scopes and instances? That might be a question for another day. That is something that I'm working on to show as a map so people can see where all those interconnection touch points are. Can Notion open application from its native app? When you say a Word document, when you save a Word document, it asks you to download. You can't open it on the page. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I don't think Notion's going to be able to open a different app inside of it, but yes, I think if you're in Notion and if you click, open a Word file, that should actually open the Word file in whatever the native application is, I believe. Yeah, don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure when you're working with the Notion desktop app, if you click on a specific file type, it should open in that application. Great question. Brian asked, Notion seems ideal for personal knowledge management, but there are parts where it's still more challenging to use it as a task manager. That's a great Great question. We actually do have an office hours coming up on October 25th, and a friend of mine, Jason Resnick, is going to come on because we actually have very, very similar setups, and we both use it to manage all of our client projects. So we are going to go into more detail about how to do that from a project management standpoint and task management standpoint on the business side of things. So if that is interesting to you, definitely stick around for that, because honestly, I feel like I'm much more on top of things with this new system than I ever was with Asana. And again, I think part of that is just being able to make yourself the dashboards that you need and surfacing the information that you need to see so it doesn't get lost. So there is definitely a bit of a learning curve for sure, getting that ready for managing clients, how you share spaces, which spaces to share. The biggest piece being managing your own internal master task database while also having a task database for clients. And so there's a few different ways to do that. It's pretty, yeah, Jason Resnick, he's got, I really like the way he has his setup too. And we, again, have very, very similar setups. So I think it will be helpful, not necessarily for people who are in, web development, web design, that sort of thing, but it should be helpful, I think, for people who do any kind of consulting and need to manage multiple projects in the same space. Hopefully that's helpful. Are there consultants I can hire to work with me to get going on this? Yes. I know Jonathan does consulting. I think Ben does consulting. I do consulting. There's lots of us, Maria as well, who is also on office hours. There are a number of us who do this with people if that's something that you need help with. Can you create a template that automates another template? Yeah, it would be good to get a better sense of what you're trying to do, but you can do some pretty amazing template inception. And so you can have templates that have template buttons and things like that inside of them. There's kind of a unique use case that we're doing with Egghead where they create a new project, but that project actually has maybe 3 projects within it. And that's something that they do every time. So we have a template that actually has an embedded database. It's like the parent database has an embedded version of itself inside of it, and then that's filtered. It's kind of hard to explain without probably showing you, but we'll definitely do future office hours on this because today we're kind of covering from scratch and building things and getting familiar with it, but there's so much you can do to kind of take it to the next level and do some of those templating and automations and things like that. So hopefully we can cover that in future office hours. Yeah. Okay. Somebody already linked to the para article. How to add emojis inside of a text field. Awesome. Jonathan, thank you so much for staying on top of answering some of those questions. So yeah, you can add an emoji plugin with your browser. There's keyboard shortcuts to do that as well. Yeah, so hopefully that covers the majority of questions that people had. I think I've covered, some of these are kind of bigger, deeper questions and might require a whole other office hours, but I do have a few YouTube videos that I go over different ways that I'm using it personally. There's lots of great templates here. Again, you can always click on that question mark in the top right corner. There's a Facebook community. There's lots of people making YouTube videos. And Fancy, you did ask about the really building out that quarterly, weekly planner. I do have a sample template of that I could send you. It's kind of a stripped down version of what I use. I would be happy to send that to you if you, I think I've already got your email, so I can send that to you. Yeah, otherwise I think we can probably wrap it up for today. I hope that's helpful in getting you started. I know it's a bit more of a beginner office hours. We do have some pretty advanced ones coming up. We have, shoot me an email or sign up, notion.mariepoulin.com, sign up for the list. And I know Fancy, she replied to my email, and I can definitely send you. Again, it's like a work in progress. It's not perfect. It doesn't have all the fields that I have, but at least it'll kind of get you started. And so yeah, upcoming, we have Tiago Forte next week. He's going to be talking about his blogging workflow in Notion. We've got Jason Resnick coming up October 25th, and we're going to go into client and project management. I think that one's going to be pretty exciting because we get a lot of questions about how to manage it for business. And we also have a couple other ones coming up. I know Tara McMullen is she's going to be covering her editorial workflow and how they do set up their editorial calendar. It's a thing of beauty. I'm really excited to chat with them about that. So hopefully this at least gets you started. There's plenty of content for you to binge watch. And we will follow up and send you guys some more links. Anything that was mentioned here, any of the links, references, reading, and a couple templates that might be helpful. This is recorded, so if you visit the same URL again, crowdcast.io/Notion from scratch, you'll be able to rewatch the video at any point. So hopefully that was helpful. Thanks for joining me on this Friday morning. And Jonathan, Ben, thank you so much for answering the questions as we went along. That was super helpful. Definitely shoot me an email, hello@mariepoulin.com. I'll send you the planners that I have available. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you next week. Thanks, everyone.